Alright, YouTube, David Harry here. Now, did you know that the iPad Pro M1 is not as good as the iPad Pro 2020 when it comes to game rendering and also the frame rates within games? As in, the M1 renders a lower resolution graphic compared to the 2020 for gameplay, and the M1 also drops a lot more frames than what the 2020 does as well. So basically the 2020 is at this moment in time, as far as I've tested, is beating the M1 hands down within gameplay. Now I say within gameplay, I've not tested anything else just yet, but it may well be the same with other applications. Now in this video, I'm going to show you the very same thing that I'm talking about using PUBG Mobile. However, I will be doing other videos similar to this one with Genshin Impact, and also I'll use Call of Duty Mobile and maybe a couple of others as well to show these problems. Now this video is going to be a bit longer than the others because this video is going to explain my methodology for the testing. The subsequent videos won't. So in the subsequent videos, I will refer back to this one if people need to understand how I've gone about this technically. Anyways, what I'm going to do now is just jump straight over onto my editing system and I will show you a whole bunch of stuff here. Now also this video has got chapters in, so feel free to just jump through to the various tests that I'm doing here. It might end up quite long, I'm not too sure, but there is a lot to explain and a lot to test. Okay, so the first thing to explain here then are the graphics settings. Now these graphics settings are identical for both of the devices. So the M1 and the 2020 are both using Ultra HD as far as graphics are concerned, and also Ultra as far as frame rate is concerned. Now they are the highest settings that you can have as far as the actual quality is concerned. And then on top of that as well, I've got water reflections switched off and anti-aliasing switched on. The reason for that is because anti-aliasing does a lot more for the game than what water reflections does, and you can only have one of them. Plus the map that I'm on is Miramar, which is a desert, so there's very little water reflections to be going on anyway. Also as well, shadows are switched on. Another thing to explain here is that as of today, which is the 24th of May 2021, both my iPad Pro M1 and iPad Pro 2020 are on the exact same version of PUBG Mobile, and also they are both as up to date as you possibly can get them. From here on in, I will just call them the M1 and the 2020. Now I'm just going to explain how I've gone about doing this test. So everything has been captured at 4K 60 frames per second, and that is exactly what my timeline is in as well. Also as well, if you see here, I have these sections which are basically composites. Now these composites won't play in real time on my system, so what it is, I then subsequently render those composites to an uncompressed master, and then they are the things that we will be looking at. Nonetheless, all of the assets that you can see on the timeline for my editor here, everything is actually of a higher resolution and higher quality than what either of the iPads are capable of producing. Now it's very important for me to have explained that to you, because everything that you're about to watch now comes from the absolute best possible quality. So with all that said, here is the first part of the test, and what we are looking at is the basic home screen to PUBG Mobile. So let me just go full screen here. So this is the M1 version here, and it probably does look quite nice. However, when I skip over to the 2020 version, this is definitely a sharper picture. So let me just bounce between them. So there's the M1, there's the 2020, back to the M1, back to the 2020 again. Now if you didn't see those differences in the resolution, don't worry, because I'm about to zoom into a part of the screen here. So let me just do this. So there's a split screen. Let me go full screen. Now we're zoomed in on the two images here. As we can clearly see, if we have a look at the number plate on the 2020, that is a lot clearer than the number plate on the M1. Also, if you have a look at the tyres on the car here, the tyres are obviously a higher resolution as well. Everything about the image on the 2020, I mean, even look at the mirrors and the light up here. the mirror and the light on the M1 just don't have any definition to them, whereas we can actually see the reflector on the light on the one for the 2020 there. So yes, there are a lot of differences there. However, this is nothing compared to the differences when we're in video. So what we're looking at now then is just the introduction before we get into the aeroplane, and this is the M1 version here. And what we're looking at there is the 2020 version. Now, these are massively different as far as resolution is concerned. The M1 in the background looks a lot blurrier than what the 2020 version does. And if you have a look at the bricks in the building in the background there, you can see on the M1, it is a lot less defined than what it is on the 2020. Another thing worth noting here as well, look at the text and all the numbers and everything on the screen on the M1. These versions look like they've been upscaled because they are a lot softer than these versions here on the 2020. If I didn't know any better, I would say that these M1 versions are upscaled, maybe even from 720. This looks like it is an upscale because they are not the same size. So M1 there, 2020 there, you can clearly see a difference in the icons and the text and the numbers, and the M1 just doesn't look as good as the 2020. Now once again, you may not have seen these differences massively, so what I'm going to do is do two variants here just so that you can see the differences. So what I'm going to do now is to play this section through properly as video and let you get a real good look at it. Okay, now there might be still people there going, well, actually, I don't think I might have seen any difference. Well, check this out. I've now blown into it. The left-hand side being the M1, you can clearly see the brickwork is really blurry. And on the right-hand side, the 2020, you can actually still see a fair bit of definition to those bricks there. And that is despite the fact that that is actually also blown into heavily. But when I play it now, you will see it even clearer with the characters on the screen. Okay, so hopefully then with that blown into there, you could see a little bit more clearly what was going on, especially in the background. And despite the fact that those characters were small on both sides, the side with the 2020 version on it was actually a lot clearer than the M1 version. So moving on to the next example here. Here is the composite for it that I am on right now. However, let me go to the video here, and we will play this through, and again just look at some of the details on either side of that split screen. Now, just in case that difference wasn't that obvious to you, I've done another zoom in version here. So on this version, as we can clearly see, even when it's just paused like this billboard here looks like a bit of a blurred mess on this side, and actually does still look quite sharp on this side with the 2020. You also still have to bear in mind here that we are zoomed in massively, so even though the 2020 is subject to like degradation, it is nowhere near as much as the M1, and we can see the mountain range in the background is different. In fact, I'll just play a few seconds of this through in video form. So this is now the next part of the test, and this will show some clear frame dropping going on, and also it will show certain issues to do with, once again, resolution, but also aliasing as well. So this part here, this is my little composite. Now what I'm going to do is go to the video element here. I'll go full screen. So the first thing we're going to watch is the M1 version playthrough, and then straight after it, the 2020 will play through. So let's have a quick look at these. So after watching those two clips playing after each other, did you notice that the M1 version was dropping a lot of frames? And also on the second take, which is the 2020, the image was once again sharper. If not, I'm just going to play it through again. So watch this carefully. You will see dropped frames occurring on the M1. I will go into more detail about that in a second. And then when the 2020 version comes in, you will see that that is sharper. Okay, so the worst thing probably out of those two things, despite the fact that it's obvious that the 2020 is sharper, for me personally, I think the worst of this is the fact that the M1 is dropping way more frames than what the 2020 does. Now, don't forget the 2020 version is still dropping frames, but it is nowhere near as bad and therefore nowhere near as obvious as the M1. So what I'm going to do here is just go into the M1 version. Now, I'm going to frame advance on my timeline here, and this will definitely show us that there are repeated frames going on. So check this out. There we go, repeated frame. I'm just going to go backwards and forwards between these two frames and they won't move. As you can see, frame 24 and frame 25 are identical. So that actually comes across as a drop frame. What it is really, drop frames are repeated frames. Now I'll carry on just scanning through frame by frame. There we go, more drop frames or repeated frames there. And again there as well. But as we can see, these are every other frame or so where we're dropping or duplicating a frame. Hence why it looks so bad on playback. Now if I carry on just going through, you can see how many of these frames are duplicating. And this is a weird one. A frame here actually bounces back. Watch this. Look at that one jumped backwards. Okay, so that'll probably do to show you how bad the frame dropping is. I won't bother showing you it on the 2020. It is there, but the M1 is just a lot worse. And before we leave this particular example, I'm just going to go full screen on this one in a second. And this should definitely show you a massive difference in the resolution as well. What we should be able to see here is on the 2020 version, it's a lot more solid, a lot sharper. And you will start seeing like shimmering going on the M1 version, with small objects on the ground and stuff, and that's actually aliasing problems. So how bad was that example just then? The M1 was not just losing a lot of frames, but it was also aliasing worse, and just basically the resolution wasn't in it compared to the 2020. Now for this next example, what I'm going to do is just show you some running up the road, and once again we're going to see a number of issues with this. So here's the composite part here, as you can see. Now let me just go to the full uncompressed render here, because this will play through properly. So we'll watch the M1 version first, and then it will go through to the 2020. Now, as far as I'm concerned, there are massive differences there as well between the M1 and the 2020. But as we can see here, I'm on another composite, and this one is a split screen between the two takes. So what I'm going to do is go and play this through. Now, just like all the other versions that have gone through so far, these are basically completely different takes done on different games. I've just tried to match up, like, you know, where the player is from take to take as best as possible. But it should still be good enough to show you, even on this with a straight run up the road that there are definite differences going on here. Now, what's quite possibly the worst thing about that example that I've just shown you there, I didn't even blow into the picture, and there was aliasing issues going on with some of the images on the M1 version, like some of the trees and then some of the lines on the buildings and stuff. And again, just in general, there was drop frames going on, and also there was a lack of resolution to do with a lot of what you were seeing on the screen. Now, of course, if you didn't see that clearly enough, I have now gone and done this composite here, which blows in. Now, when I play through this one in video form now, just keep an eye on what's going on the left-hand side of both screens or both of the splits here, and see the absolute difference that's going on. It is absolutely insane. Now, that last example there clearly shows some really bad problems going on the M1 version to do with aliasing and things with like fine detail and also like straight lines and stuff like that. That is also indicative of the game internally upscaling graphics, which is the reason why I believe that, I don't know, maybe it really is only playing 720 within the iPad, and then the iPad is upscaling it for the output to the screen. And as we could see on the 2020, it was way less. Okay, so hopefully those examples that I've shown you will give you a really good idea as to what is going on here. And I have to also impress upon people the way that I go about capturing stuff and the way that I edit using all that uncompressed type data and stuff, and then pre-compositing and then using uncompressed composites and stuff like that. It is way higher quality and resolution than what the iPads can actually do themselves. So I'm actually like, way above anything that they can do as far as resolution and quality is concerned. And the reason why I'm explaining this again is just so that this is all being done properly. So those issues that we're seeing there are as a result of the iPad Pro M1, which is clearly lower resolution as far as the graphics rendering is concerned within the game, and is also dropping a lot more frames. I'm still yet to see if this is going to happen with the other games, although I have a bit of a feeling it might just be the same, so keep an eye out for that stuff. Now, what's really disappointing here is the fact that the M1 chip is way more powerful than the A12Z that is inside the iPad Pro 2020. That is hands down the absolute truth. So there's no reason why this should be happening, unless the iPad Pro M1 may need its OS optimizing even further. It may even need the apps optimizing further. I don't know. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I'm going to have to try and find out. So what I will be doing over the next few days, I'm going to be getting in touch with Apple and asking them, can they explain why this is going on? Because if I see this in more things, I'm seriously going to have to consider sending my one back, which is like, it's going to be horrible, because I've been looking forward to this. As anybody might know who like watches my stuff, my gaming stuff, especially on my other channel, I play tons of COD on my iPad Pro 2020, and it's all out to an external monitor through like USB hubs and stuff like that. And I play with game controllers. I basically treat my 2020 iPad Pro like it was a console. So I was personally expecting at least as good as that, but better with the M1. And the truth is, it's a step backwards. It's wrong, it's bad, it's terrible. So what I'm going to do anyway, get in touch with Apple, see what's going on. But there's a fair chance mine's going back. And if it goes back, I've got good reason for that. But what's even worse, I'm still waiting on my 12.9 inch version. So I need to find out off Apple quickly if I'm likely to have the same problems with that, which I would have thought yes, because it's got the same hardware in it. Anyways, I'm not going to kind of jump the gun on any of this stuff. I'll give it a few days, get as much information as I can, and I will also do more videos explaining to people how I'm getting on. But don't forget, if you're into this type of stuff and you want to know more what's going on, keep an eye on my channel because I'm definitely going to be testing a few other games and quite possibly some other apps. Anyways, if you've liked the video, please give it a massive thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to my channel and clicking on the bell notification icon whilst you're at it. And if you're into the gaming stuff, especially stuff to do with the iPad Pro 2020, check my other channel out, which is The Game Thing. And you can get at that by going to www.thegamething.com. There will be a lot more game stuff going on there, and especially stuff to do with the Apple TV, the new version as well, the Apple TV 4K 2021. And of course, my older 2020 iPad Pro, because it looks like that's staying. Anyways, I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye now.